Welcome, everyone. I'm Jamie Ratcliffe from Great Lakes Water Safety. Thanks for coming. I do hope that you and yours are staying healthy, both physically and mentally. I know this is hard on everyone. I know some of you have had COVID. Many of you know people who have gotten it, even lost people to it. We're at something like 1.7 million cases confirmed in the US and 100,000 deaths. So this thing isn't over by any means, although people are heading back to the beaches. So when we had to postpone this year's big in-person Great Lakes Water Safety Unconference that we had planned for Traverse City due to the pandemic, we were obviously very disappointed. Our planning team had put in so much work and so many hours putting together a great two-day experience for everyone. So we decided to keep moving forward and pivot to this series of virtual water safety jam sessions or town hall style webinars. And what many of you told us was the most compelling content that we had planned for the unconference, we've brought into this new virtual format. And you also said lunchtime would be a good time, so we're having it at lunchtime. And it's so great that so many of you are able to join. So here we are today. We're all stir crazy and hungover from drinking too many quarantinis, and our eyes are shaped like little rectangles from so much screen time. I actually miss in-person meetings because it was a break from that. Anyway, joining me today for our first jam session are some water safety rock stars. We have Laura Rowen from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. She's not on camera, but say hi, Laura.
Good morning, everyone.
All right. We also have Adam Bueling from the Chicago Park District. Say hi and correct me if I mispronounce that.
Hey everybody, this is Adam. Nice to see you all.
All right. I was practicing with the Bueller. Figured that was close enough. Not that he's ever gotten that before. We have Mark Breederland from the Michigan Sea Grant. Say hi, Mark.
Hi, Jamie. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining in today.
And also on our panel is Dan Metcalfe. He's an emergency management coordinator from Essex, Ontario. He's not actually presenting, but he's going to give us moral support and commentary from his expertise. Say hi, Dan.
Hello, everyone. Good to be here.
Good to have you. So before I get too far, I want to take a minute to thank our generous sponsors. We couldn't have these for free without them, and we really appreciate their dedication to our cause. I'm going to go back now and just give you a little overview of the consortium really quick before we start our sessions. We're not only a nonprofit, but we're a community. We're a water safety community of best practice, and our mission is to help people safely enjoy the Great Lakes. We're a nonprofit, as I said. We're best practice. We have nearly 700 members now. We're still growing fast, and we have members representing all 8 Great Lakes states and Ontario. We have 2020 goals, and I won't read these all, but 20% less drownings. We had almost 20% less drownings last year, according to our friends at the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project that track all that, and that was despite higher water levels. We want to get 20% more members, more signage, more educational programs, more heroes recognized, all these different things. So 2020 is our year. It's a rough year in so many ways, but we aligned our goals around the 2020 theme. We also have action committees to help us accomplish these goals, and we have dozens and dozens of people from our hundreds of members serving in a higher capacity on these many action committees. And this is really where we find results and have an impact and add value across the Great Lakes area as the water safety community. So lots of different topics here, lots of initiatives and projects under each one. And if you're interested in joining any of these, you can reach out to me or any of the leaders listed here. So our format for these fast-paced 1-hour jam sessions is to have some brief presentations up front, and we're going to open it up for questions and comments via the chat. So if you haven't already, you can start asking questions or giving comments in the chat window. All encouragement and suggestions are welcome, as well as your specific questions. So we'll do 3 presentations, and then we'll open it up for questions. I'll interrupt here and there with some other bonus material and surprises for this or future jams. Does that sound good? Again, thanks to our sponsors. Love you guys. Really appreciate you. Everybody good? Sound good? Ready to rock? All right. First off, let's switch it over to who's going first. Laura's going first. So here is her first slide. I'm going to be advancing for her, but Laura, it's all yours. Take it away.
And good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. And Jamie, you can advance it to my first slide if you would. So physical activity is good and necessary for our bodies and mental health. We are the water and serenity that the beach offers. We recharge, relax, get some fresh air and vitamin D. And we also think of these shared spaces as a way to connect with others. So my objective today is to share with you some safe ways to do this. So to make sure that you and everyone in your family has a safe and enjoyable day at the beach, preparation is key. Planning ahead will help assure that the day is yours to enjoy. So really know the status of the beach. This is an excellent link where you can check the status of the beach or park that you want to go to along the shoreline. It's not enough to know that the sun is shining, but this is not a new thing. Do not plan to go in or near the water if conditions are hazardous. You can easily check for your park. And anybody who loves the Great Lakes shoreline, they should have this website posted as their favorites on their computer. It's up to each of us to make this work and to make it work well. Plan to visit parks and beaches that are close to your home. Travel might require stops, increase potential contact with people and surfaces that might be contaminated, and who wants to spend all their time in the car if the beach doesn't work out? Once you get there, assess the situation. If the beach or the park area looks crowded, or if it becomes crowded, it might be the best call to come back another day. Make sure that you and your family members keep a safe distance between yourself and other people in and out of the water. And you also might want to consider the extra challenges that this might pose due to the narrowing of some of our beaches due to erosion and also the narrowness of piers. Think about how you can safely navigate those if it's safe to be out on those structures at all, but think about that as a shared space every time you approach one. Also think about what you need before you leave and have these items with you, such as sunscreen and insect repellent, life vests, hand sanitizer, face masks, and drinking water. And we'll talk a little bit more about this. And finally, leave nothing behind. Be sure to pack out everything that you pack in, including trash. So as mentioned, plan to visit parks and beaches if they are close to your home, and by all means, please stay home if you or family members are sick. Avoid common touch facilities. Assume that no one is wiping these down or taking care of them. This is not the time to toss a ball or a frisbee around, so don't yet engage in group sports or games. And be sure to bring in, if it's allowed, your own food and beverages. Tailgating and sharing food in picnic areas is not a good idea right now. And finally, don't put yourself in harm's way in and out of the water. And this includes digging holes and tunnels in soft, unstable sand. These can collapse and cause suffocation. And there will be more on water safety in future presentations. So everyone should wear a life vest near the water. Even for that, visitors need to stay vigilant and watch each other for play near or in the water. Currents and tides can pull people with a life vest out into deeper water, and someone wearing one can still be overcome by waves and currents and get into trouble. Fresh water might not be available to drink, and you should avoid water fountains during this time. So you should plan to bring in your own. And just because the park is open doesn't mean the pandemic is over. Extra caution is required now more than ever as we share public spaces. Always have face masks ready. You might find yourself in close proximity to others unexpectedly, so be ready to protect yourself and your family members. It's not necessary to wear a mask outside if safe distancing practices are being observed, but do not use face masks on children under the age of 2 or on people who are unable to remove their own face mask by themselves. Next slide, please, Jamie. So yes, COVID-19 is still a public health threat. As beaches and parks and public spaces open, they can only remain that way if people take personal responsibility for how they are used. People are still being discouraged from traveling as a means to keep this disease from spiking again. So consequently, communities are trying to open their public spaces for locals. Parking lots, restrooms, and other common spaces may remain closed in order to discourage people from traveling to reach these destinations, and as a measure too, to keep the size of crowds down. So plan to visit parks that are close to home. So the National Park Service is working with local administrators, and they will decide on a park by park basis whether a national park will be open. So here are some excellent sites where you can check on the status of the beach that you want to go to. And please check with individual parks for specific details, since in many cases, as I mentioned, visitor centers, concessions, bathroom facilities might remain closed. And this is all for public protection. So yes, the water calls to us. It's rejuvenating, calming. It replenishes our very core. But do not be surprised if your great idea to head to the beach occurred to hundreds of other people too. Consider coming back another day if you find the beach is crowded, or if it becomes crowded once you get there. You can only be responsible for your own behavior and to a degree your family members. We've all seen people not behaving as we would have, or making different choices and disregarding rules. But please keep in mind that sensitivities are running especially high. We are ready to get outside, and it's best to give people grace and space. You'll feel better for it at the end of the day. And remember, in Michigan, you're never more than 6 miles away from a body of water. So please consider going to the beach that's closest to you to make this easiest. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's have a round of applause in the chat room for that. Like, I love the humor as well as the important information that you shared. So if you have questions, put them in the chat. We're going to get to them after the other two presentations. And then we're going to move on now to Adam Bueling's slides.
All right. Thanks, guys. So this is a quick rundown of just what we've been doing in Chicago to try and, first of all, make decisions about whether we're going to be opening our beaches or not. And then when we're pursuing that, what else we can do to try and keep our public safe. So we'll jump to the first slide there. So obviously there's a ton of information out there that you have to sift through in order to make a decision about whether to open up a beach or whether your beach is safe. Here in Chicago, we're relying on information that we kind of put into about 3 different buckets. One is our health and safety guidelines. Those health and safety guidelines, we're focused on what's coming out at the national level, at the state level, and at the local level. And I'm assuming that in Ontario, you probably have a similar structure. Here in Illinois, we have our CDC, our state health department, and then the city of Chicago has a Chicago Department of Public Health that's providing some guidance as well. The other health and safety guidelines that you can look to are best practices if they're available. I know there's not a lot out there, but just being aware of what similar agencies are up to. In some cases, just having consistent practices across the board helps our public kind of understand how to interact with our pools and our beaches and our lakefronts. So knowing what your neighbors are up to can help you create consistent messaging. There's also political and legal considerations that you have to take into account, state directives and local ordinances. We would like to think that the health and safety guidelines and the political and legal directives all line up, but in some cases that's not true. So it's important to be aware of what those directives are as well. And then the third bucket that we've had to look at a lot lately is the social piece of it. Is there a high demand for access to your lakefront right now? And are people likely to follow the rules and guidelines that you put in place to keep everyone safe on that lakefront? And that goes both ways. Are they likely to stay out of the water if you don't put lifeguards out? Or conversely, are they likely to follow your lifeguards' instructions about social distancing and wearing masks if your lifeguards are out there and your beaches are open? So things to keep in mind. So for us, we found as we were putting together proposals, layers of proposals, plan C, D, E, F, at some point we got to a position where we found that it was easiest and most helpful for us to just kind of have a bucket of other people's ideas. And when it came to sitting down with decision makers and telling them this is what we can do, to put in front of them the decisions that other agencies were doing. So on the left side, you see what LA County has decided to do with their lakefront. And then on the right side, this is what the Park District has proposed here in Chicago. And we pretty much copied that verbatim. We made a couple of minor adjustments based on our own local considerations. So things like sunbathing, not being allowed in Los Angeles County, but here in Chicago, where we're much more densely populated, we feel like those beaches still need to allow for some sunbathing. So we put out there that they need to be socially distanced. And then stand-up kayaking, or stand-up paddleboarding, kayaking, and canoeing, following our Illinois Department of Public Health and our Illinois Department of Natural Resources recommendations that there be no more than 2 people per watercraft, putting that out there as well. So that was kind of how we've approached this process. Look at what other people are doing and copy it. Obviously, we want opening to be the goal. We know that our public, our communities want to get out onto the water, but what are some other ways that we can support water safety? That was a big question that came to us early in this process. What happens if we can't open our lakefront? What happens if, the community that we serve decides to get their open water recreation somewhere else, somewhere where there's not lifeguards? And so we said, we got to, first of all, be flexible. Be aware of the new information that's coming out every day. There's some information out now about effects of sunlight on the COVID-19, and we're waiting to see what how that turns out once they do some peer-reviewed testing. There's obviously questions about community compliance with social distancing requirements. If you put out social distancing requirements, will the community comply? And if they don't, do you resort to more aggressive measures for making sure that there is social distancing? And then one question that we're starting to think about right now is how is staff going to perform in this new role? Either in their role enforcing social distancing or just in their role of being a lifeguard, but having to be socially distanced or having to wear a mask. I know there are a lot of 16-year-old lifeguards out there that are probably not thinking about the dangers, but it's going to be important for us to know if that lifeguard is going to wear his mask every day and stay safe. And then the last thing would be to be creative. Obviously, we're not going to get as much face time with the public as we used to, so we need to find other ways to communicate the safety expectations that we have through signage, through social media, and now through virtual trainings. Here in Chicago, we're starting to look at putting together a virtual training video specific to our lakefront so that we can introduce the community to the lakefront and essentially do a facility orientation. Explain to them before they come to the beach all of the rules and regulations, all of the expectations that we would have for them, and to start to engage them a little bit in the water safety process. How do you recognize a person who's in distress? Who do you tell if that happens? So we're putting together that virtual training now, and we hope to be sharing that in the next few days. We're excited about that opportunity because we know that the safety on our lakefront has got to be a multi-layered approach. It's not going to be just lifeguards. It also has to be the public making good decisions. And so We've been creative, or we're trying to be creative in the ways that we promote water safety specific to our lakefront. And that's it. Obviously, everybody's decisions about how to reopen, and if they reopen, are going to be specific to them. But we wish you all the best of luck. And as I said, just talk to those agencies around you and learn what they're doing so that you can maybe steal and pick up some good tricks from them. So that's it.
Thank you, Adam. More applause in the chat room. That was fantastic. You know, this is so complex, whether you're in a smaller beach or a huge area like Chicago, we can all learn from each other. There's a lot of commonalities, even though there are a lot of differences too. So thank you for that perspective. Again, questions and comments in the chat, and we'll get to them after the next presentation, which is from our own Mark Breederland. Mark, here come your slides.
All right, Jamie, thanks. And greetings, everybody across the miles here from Northwest Michigan. Again, I've donned my my safety vest here, but when our kids go to the beach, we have some real nice kind of PFDs that you might wear if you were going water skiing or wakeboarding or one of those kinds of efforts. And if you're wearing one of those, you're probably not going to drown. You may float down the coast a little ways, but anyways, I'm glad to be here. Michigan Sea Grant has been involved on some water safety issues. We kind of have three legs of our stool. We have a research leg, we have an extension, an outreach leg, and we have a communications leg. And all three of those have been active in some water safety issues for the last 20 years. So we're glad to just add value and work with everybody. This is such an important issue. So just a few comments here for 2020. Things are different, and I know in a couple weeks we have another jam specifically on the issues of the high water. I think that's on June 10th. But things are different on the shore, and I think you've heard from the other speakers that we need to really look before we leap. We need to be extra observant. Some of these cliffs have really changed or whatnot due to the high water and other things. So let's go to the next slide. This was in Leelanau County, that picture that I just showed you, but I want to remind people that there is debris all over the water, whether it's in the water, buried halfway on the sand. I think water shoes would be a good safety recommendation for a lot of our beach walking. There are definitely nails and screws that are sticking out of these materials. So there's lots of different things out there that you may not see in a normal year, as well as the trees and branches. This is Point Betsy, all kinds of logs and branch materials. And again, things get commingled sometimes with them, potentially old fishing line or other things. So again, just a chance to be extra heads up as we kind of head out in the early part of this season. So again, just want to give a few of these words of wisdom to be extra watchful. There are, again, unknowns to give a wide berth for our work when we're on the shore. People that are working for cities, townships, villages, counties, in their parks department. Again, we're not running at all 8 cylinders these days, so we just need to be extra careful as we're heading out to enjoy the Great Lakes beaches, which are absolutely worth enjoying wherever you are: Ontario, Michigan, Wisconsin, you name it. So again, you've heard from the other speakers too. Each individual jurisdiction may have particular guidelines, and again, they've probably tried to put up some signage. This was in Frankfort, Michigan, by their pier. They had specific signs made there as people ventured out. So again, look for those signs. They are put there intentionally, and just take an extra second to think about what activities are going to be there. And as I think about these piers and things, again, with debris that's floating out there, they can be stuck in between the rocks, all kinds of different issues related activities near these piers, and we have a lot of signage at the Michigan Sea Grant website. You can just Google Michigan Sea Grant about steering clear of the pier and different things. So those are general safety guidelines for water safety in general, as the currents are so impacted by these structures out there. So this was a parking lot in Leelanau County. Again, here's another, just a keep out sign that was put it there intentionally. It's kind of falling in, as you can see. And again, not be playing around those kinds of places, but focus on where we can enjoy the beach safely as we get started. And I just wanted to close with to think about remembering. In this slide, you know, remembering people that have passed away at this pier, Caleb Sutter here. And I also think about the water temperatures early in the season. And again, hypothermia can set in 10 minutes or less, and it definitely can kill too. So lots of factors. We want to just encourage extra heads up as we begin to think about heading out to the beaches here in 2020 in this COVID-19 year, and think about enjoying them safely so that we can protect everybody, the individual, the families, and the first responders. So Jamie, thanks for allowing me to be a part of this.
Absolutely. Thank you, partner. Big round of applause in the chat for Mark. Interesting stuff. Great pictures. I can't believe all that debris. Man, that's amazing. It just adds to the complexity of reopening the beaches. So I wanted to see if our other panelist, Dan Metcalfe from Ontario, had any additional comments or anything you wanted to underscore from the presentations we've already heard before we open it up and get into the questions in the chat room. Dan?
Yeah, Jamie, thank you. Just to give an Ontario perspective, and my colleagues Mark and Laura and Adam have been mentioning all those things that we're doing in Ontario from a healthcare perspective with the social distancing. In Ontario, the parks, whether national, provincial, municipal, or conservation areas, have been opening in a very measured way, primarily just to give access to trails and walking. Most of the beaches are not open. Even our ports and launches, launch areas, and docks are not open. So if there's people on the water and boats, it's mainly recreational from their own docks, fishing and that sort of thing. And still, the recommendation is to keep the social distancing if you're on the water. So very measured approach. I love the mention about hypothermia because we've had a very cool spring. If people end up in the water off their recreational boats, that risk is pretty high if you're in the water even for a short period of time. Our coastlines have changed. Our bluff areas are eroded, even to impact our highways. So those beaches that you may be going to, those depths and coastline changes and the deadheads that are in the water and floating are a safety issue. So be safe, everybody. Keep the social distancing up, and beware if you're coming over from, our friends to the south, coming over into Canadian waters. Things are not all open, and you may find law enforcement enforcing some of those things, and parks officials approaching you if you're coming into the shoreline. Hopefully, everything will open in time, and I wish everybody a safe summer.
Thank you, Dan. Really appreciate your insights. So, Mark, I haven't really been able to monitor the chat with the screen sharing, but do you want to throw a question out to the group?
So I guess I'm curious, again, how folks are thinking about the early stages, what kind of communications have come out, those kinds of things as we get ready for summer season to really crank up across the Great Lakes.
Yeah, so here in Chicago, our lakefront has been closed by city ordinance. Our mayor has put out a directive that we need to close the lakefront, and that's based on assumptions about community compliance with social distancing. When social distancing was first put out as a directive, there wasn't a lot of compliance, and so they were very concerned about a spike and a spread And so we closed down that lakefront, and our lakefront remains closed. We won't be putting out lifeguards until the lakefront opens, but we are moving through the phases. Chicago moves into phase 3 pretty quickly here next few days, and then hopefully to phase 4 not long after that. So, but we're in compliance with our city guidelines here in Chicago.
What else?
So this is Laura. If you'll let me chime in really quickly, I especially wanted to thank Susan for the mention and reminder that face masks should not be used in the water. And thanks for calling that out.
I'm just going to read something that Mary Ann wrote on here. It says, to answer some things that the beaches are doing, Wells Street Beach in Northwest Indiana has set up guidelines to our beach coming guests. Basically, they're talking about parking and parking every other car to allow for social distancing, encouraging an outlining of the area of social distancing in the sand, asking for and having marked the ground at the restrooms and concessions, and requesting masks in the patio. We had a successful Memorial Day opening. So there's a comment again on another kind of some of the protocols that people are dealing with here in May and beyond. Again, things are changing soon, as we know, and seems like they change daily sometimes, weekly sometimes, and minute by minute other times.
Yeah, Drew Ferguson in Cleveland says they're seeing a lot of activity on beaches and waterfront parks, including a lot more paddlecraft already. And he's curious if others have seen an uptick in paddles, paddlecraft, and so on so far.
Jamie, it's Dan. I think in some of our larger municipal areas where there's a little bit more access and a little bit more people trying to get out and enjoy the outside, there's definitely an uptick in watercraft use and beach use. And like everywhere, trying to educate on the social distancing and that kind of thing is, that you have to give them some grace. We've been kind of stir crazy and locked up, but it's important in this COVID-19 emergency situation to respect that social distance. We don't want to see another spike coming from the healthcare perspective in more cases and those kinds of things.
Just comment some observation here in Grand Traverse Bay, where when the wind is down, the waters are very calm, and there's lots of people out in kayaks and stand-up paddle boards and other things. And again, as I see them, I'm driving by the bay, I'm like, boy, I hope they have some flotation equipment, but also the shock for the hypothermia, because the water temperatures are very cold. And again, hopefully everybody's safe as they're doing that. But I think there is a great demand that people are really trying to get out, and just the propensity of so many different kinds of watercraft out there. So I know that's another one of our topics later on, talking more about encouraging people on a variety of watercraft.
Susan Ock reminds us, or lets us know, that the American Life Saving Association has a paper out on how COVID affects the lifeguard's job in particular. So that'll be worth looking up, American Life Saving Association. And we also have a question from Susan McGraw. With teenagers being less at risk with COVID, but more at risk with drowning, how can we combat this invincibility mindset while at the beaches early on? Who should we reach out to at our local beach if we see people not following social distancing guidelines and policies?
Yeah, I was going to make a quick comment, Jamie, that, park officials, conservation officials, water safety officials, and law enforcement are probably going to be able to give a little bit of guidance and recommendations on water safety. And anybody that's out on the water in these days with the high water levels in the Great Lakes should be wearing a life jacket, should be wearing or preparing for hypothermia or getting out of the water and warming up. Like Marcus said, keeping an eye on that situation, being safe when you're participating in the water and at any level and any watercraft size. It's extremely important.
I can address real quick some of the concerns about the teenage invincibility mindset. There's a little bit of work with Every Minute Matters, I believe is the agency, but they've kind of come to the conclusion that teenagers, as much as they want to go out and be invincible, They are also very concerned about not dying in dumb ways. And so when we make the argument that going out and drowning is a really dumb way to die because there's no reason why you need to drown. That's just, in a lot of cases, that's you putting yourself into a bad situation. So explaining to kids that, you don't need to put yourself in a situation where you're going to get into trouble, and really focusing on teaching them that it's smart to know how to be safe around water. It's smart to learn how to swim. It's smart to be conscious around water of how you're behaving with your friends, and not being that kid who goes into the water and doesn't come up again. That is the recommendation that they've been making, and we're trying to start incorporating some of that into our training. So
Good.
Todd asked the question about, how can we tell it's, where the beaches are left? And again, people have kind of been constricted where they can travel in different places. You'll find a few places where the sands have accrued, and many other places where the beaches have really severely eroded and obviously are covered up by the high water levels. So at a minimum, I think you can assume that the beaches are going to be fairly narrow. This picture I have on the screen is out in Platte Bay at Sleeping Bear Dunes. It's very wide and flat there. And even a comment, right up near the where the dune grass is, the boards have been thrown up there, and I saw all kinds of nails and screws sticking out of some of those boards way up the beach there. So, but there are a few places where the beaches are still going to be wide and accreting. So I think people will be just go out and explore it, but expect it to be a little different.
We do have more questions to get at and more comments and so on. I just want to jump in to break things up for a minute, something that we promised we'd do in each of these water safety jams is to talk about our fundamentals, our top water safety tips. And Matt Gillen from the National Weather Service created this, what we're calling the water safety wheel image. And Todd Marcy from Michigan Sea Grant has been touching it up here and there, and it's going to go into our new brochure, which I'm going to preview for you in our next session next week. But these are some of the messages that we should all be repeating every chance we get. Stay dry when waves are high. Know before you go by checking with the weather forecast. Steer clear of the pier. So many people are jumping off the piers, especially in the warm air, with warm air temperatures into the cold water. They get that gas reflux. They can drown very, very easily and quickly. Break the grip of the rip current, flip, float, and follow. We want that to be, as well known as stop, drop, and roll for fires, and stop, look, and listen at railroad tracks. And our friends at the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project are big proponents of the flip, float, and follow, and we're trying to share that every way we can along with these other messages. And I think our top one that we want everyone, if you only have one bit of advice to give people, if you only have 30 seconds to give somebody a bit of advice, is the life jacket one. Don't just bring it, wear it. That's so important. I think Susan Ock planted in my brain that you don't put your seatbelt on as you're about to crash, or your bike helmet on as you're about to fall. So you shouldn't expect that you can put your life jacket on as you're about to drown. I'm wearing mine now in the safety of my own home office. Mark's wearing his, just to illustrate the point that they're not just for kids, they're for adults too, and we should all be setting the example. So those are our main messages, and we want to get those out every way we can. People think they need to reword them and say them differently, but the more they're repeated, that these are simple, catchy, easy to remember, and the more we repeat them, the more they're going to stick and they're going to make a difference. And especially when someone is either heading to the water, they're going to think of some of them, or if they get in trouble, they're going to remember things like flip, float, and follow, the more they hear it. So I just wanted to interject that. And now we can get back to more questions and comments.
I'm just going to read one here. I'm going to read one here from Vanessa. She said, because of the closure of many life jacket loan stations, Safe Kids Coalition is looking at holding up a drive-up education session for fitting jackets and then giving them a coupon or to purchase one. And they were questioning, does anyone have luck with partnering with a shop for a discount coupon or a company that is great for bulk purchasing? So that's a wonderful question. Again, you want to have an active life jacket, not one really that inflates like mine as a one-time use. something, if you're going to be swimming around in it, that you know, the neoprene and other kinds of materials that are flexible. So I don't know, Jamie, if you or others have any comments on that idea of coupons or discounts, and also the kind of the drive up part.
You know, Jamie, I was just going to mention, you know, with the historic high water levels, we're going to see some major water flows. When windstorms come up, that's going to change the way things are appearing out there in the water. Be very cautious. You know, the rip currents, the water levels around piers are going to be higher. This is going to increase the risk and the dangers to swimmers and boaters. So just a reminder. And Mark mentioned the deadheads and the debris that have been coming down the tributaries and rivers. They're going to be out there on the water. They're going to be there on the beaches. So take extra caution and make sure you've got a life jacket on for sure. That's the high point.
Just somebody really loved the graphic and can't wait to share it and use it. That's really encouraging. Again, I think a lot of people are observing that there's going to be a lot of kind of little evolutionary changes as they monitor and adjust as the summer gets started. What little tweaks in the system and education. So nobody has everything figured out for this year, you know, and we're all just kind of trying to do the best we can. So expect changes, and again, lots of monitoring and adjusting as the summer goes on is probably going to be a real key for 2020.
We've had some comments about the stigma of drowning, and we don't want to, you know, have that phrase "a dumb way to die" catching on in any way. You know, we don't want to blame the victims. It's terrible when you see that happen. And while it may be a natural psychological thing to try to distance yourself from any kind of tragedy, I mean, none of us think we're going to drown. And as soon as we hear about a drowning, we want to know, you know, what caused it. So we can go, well, I would never do that. And then they blame the victim, but we don't want that. This can happen to anyone at any time. That's why it's called, you know, an accidental and unintentional death. So Dave Benjamin from Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project just wanted to remind everybody about the stigma of drowning and to not blame the victim. Thanks for that, Dave. Holly was talking about West Marine. It's been helpful in their community with getting life jacket discounts. I think Holly had something else. Maybe you already mentioned about the heavy volumes at the beach and the water with boating, particularly concerned with Marine Patrol has not been able to hire summer help. We were hearing about communities that aren't rehiring their lifeguards. We're going to have a session on this. This is something really near and dear to us as an organization, is to advocate for lifeguards. They absolutely save lives, and at beaches without lifeguards, you've got people just going there to enjoy their day, having to become would-be rescuers, and they often end up drowning as well when they go in after someone else without knowing and having proper training or equipment. So those are all things to keep in mind that we're going to talk about in more depth in our future sessions. I'm going to jump to a couple more slides here as we start to wrap up, and then I'll leave a few more minutes for any final questions. But speaking of our future jams, again, this is a series. We're going to have 7 in total, 1 every week. The next one will be next Wednesday. We moved this one for somebody, I forget who, to have it on the Thursday, but we're going to try to stick to Wednesdays around lunchtime for the future ones. But next week, nudging people towards safer behavior around the water. This is about the psychology of persuasion and influence, whether it's one-on-one or you working with the media to get the word out to millions of people. And that's going to be really interesting, the whole psychology of it, because just informing people isn't enough, or just ordering them isn't enough. You need something in between that's more persuasive. The impact of high water levels and beach erosion. Huge topic. You saw the pictures earlier. We've seen this for the past couple of years, and this year looks to be even worse than last year with the high water levels. So we want to see how that's going to affect and talk through how that changes the safety equation. Translating wave and current science into reducing risk. We've got wave and current scientists. This is their career. Guy Meadows is amazing, and others. And of course, the meteorologists that want to provide those forecasts and those warnings based on that science. And they keep getting better. and we're going to have a fascinating talk about that. Consecutive drownings in Great Lakes hotspots. We're going to have some people who've experienced that in their community, what their lessons learned are, and how to prevent that from happening again, even one, let alone consecutive. What every kid and their parents should know about water safety. Kids are the highest risk group. You know, the drowning is the #1 cause of unintentional death in kids 1 to 4, and the second in kids under 15, especially boys. About 80 to 85% of drowning victims are male. So we want to target those audiences that are affected most by drowning tragedies. So that'll be a really good discussion right before the 4th of July holiday weekend. And then, as I said, our bonus session will be talking about lifeguard programs. We want to shift this and have a paradigm shift in thinking about lifeguard programs and not seeing them as expensive or worrying about liability, which turns out is a myth. We want to get more communities to invest in lifeguard programs to keep their residents and their visitors safe. So that's a little teaser for all the ones upcoming. We've got great panelists for those. We're going to keep improving these as we go, and we want you to join us for all of them. Let's see what else I had here. Again, I want to thank our generous sponsors. Fantastic. We were able to offer these sessions for free for everyone. And again, we're going to put them on YouTube so everyone can see them afterwards. I want to thank our planners. I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody. I was trying to remember because we've had so many people involved, but the core team was Mark. This is both for the unconference that we had to postpone as well as these virtual sessions that we've pivoted to. But Mark, Kim, Dan, Bob, Holly, Susan, Scott, Jill, Leslie, and Alap, thank you so much. And if I missed anybody, please forgive me. I know a lot of people helped out here and there. Thank you to our speakers, Laura, Adam, Mark, and Dan. Another big round of applause in the chat room. And thanks to all of you for joining us, for taking the time out of your crazy day. I know it's more screen time, but this is important stuff. And we really, really want to work together and share everything and work as a community of best practice to build on what we already know and add the latest information to our body of knowledge so that we're better at this. So again, join us for next week's. Contact me if you'd like to join on any of the action committees. See if your organization would like to sponsor us. I want to keep adding more logos and more slides for our sponsors. Of course, you can donate it to us yourself at any time. And please follow us on social media. I thought this was a great kickoff. I hope you did too. And we'll keep improving on them as we go forward with the series. Contact me about anything at any time. I'm happy to talk to you about water safety or anything else. Stay safe, stay healthy. Love the ones you love more than ever, and we'll see you next time.